Oh,
I
sorry.
might have figured out plants now.
Oh, that's good.
Really
Well,
long.
Daniel should be here soon. Honestly, I don't blame you. Everything getting moved around, I'm sure stuff got
Right?
super switched around.
All of the power stuff is way different.
Oh, I bet.
Alright, do it one more time. Dang it!
Are the actual ejector chambers on?
So now you have to.
Oh.
My goodness, you two are geniuses.
No, wait, it was the other side.
Like
Like
that.
now you go.
He was right.
Very
Oh,
strange
Christian, you
stuff.
right
Over here.
Oh, I did you touch it?
What is the Daniel? I think Daniel's here. I'm gonna leave him to deal with this.
Oh, it's Sam. Good morning. Yeah, there should be another switch.
Well, I
What's up,
I
guys?
should have turned on everything that I turned on it.
Everybody
fast.
And if it goes off the table, you get a letter too.
Too late to join.
Nothing's working.
Yeah, that's good.
Alright,
I have a letter for you out of turn.
Oh no, that's a
Work
secret.
on it. You guys know what you're doing.
I'm sorry, Lexi.
Don't be
It's
sorry.
all been
Jake.
moved around.
No, you're fine.
He's
Don't be
ruined
sorry.
the
It's-
sequence.
It's the
It's,
same.
his
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
stuff
I
I
think
was
it's
talking about. Those are cool, huh?
No, these are amazing, yeah.
Yeah, we just need to find the other one.
Good morning. Next round.
Because they do help.
No, yeah, that's
Everybody
great.
wants to play
Short
with me.
people
That's
won't
totally
know
great.
something.
Wait, no.
Liam, awesome job. We're
Oh,
good.
it wasn't my
We're
turn.
good.
So yeah.
Yeah, no.
no, Christian, you're
yeah, we're
yeah,
having trouble
I
with sound
shoot
because
the-
everything got switched
Oh,
around. We had
that's
to
not
move
plugged
all
in.
of our sound equipment
Wait, that
out
actually
of the way,
worked.
and then now they're back. Nothing's really connected, so we
It's
don't really
not.
have sound. So we're
I
just
already
like,
tried.
Well, you know what?
You're out.
I would just do it acoustically.
I know that's
What
what
do
we
you have
last
I
week.
mean, it's like,
And we could, but
Only because I'm
Both
we
for
could-
our
it doesn't
turn.
mess with them unless
It's
you just have to have the drummer like play.
Wait, it's
play
only-
we don't even have a drummer.
well
so
then,
it's perfect.
yeah, I
Yeah,
would.
but Jaden loves doing sound, so if
Yeah.
he can. it'd be
I know we
really
get flooded.
You don't
Morning
see
full
it.
picture.
great.
CR for Christian.
Busy but groovy.
Dude, remember
So-
you almost got hit on Wednesday?
Yes.
Anyway,
I got hit. Almost got hit like 3 times.
I do a lot of
No, but
No!
what happens
Well,
is like I don't even know if I have like 4,000.
I live in this
Mine's
matter.
in your
You're gonna grab something real quick.
So
That's
the-
funny.
having them in the my top 20 is a really good thing.
No, no, that's great.
Okay, so this is my design. What is the name of that song?
Battle of the Champions, people.
No, it's not champions, it's battle of the awful.
Thought I'd give you my
Oh,
heart.
dang!
This
Yes!
CR to CR,
I
you?
wonder what- oh, I guess it's thought I'd give you my heart.
Get a D, get a D, out of play.
It wouldn't be Lord Have.
Oh!
No, it's not heaven.
Oh, D! Yes!
Okay.
Third.
Yeah, I can even see.
I
I'll go
showed
first.
Alexi last night how nobody knows that song.
Third.
You want to be first? So I go second. First,
Will it be first?
second, third.
What? I thought it would be first.
That's
Second.
part.
That's hungry.
No, that's a different song.
We'll just go
go second.
Oh, just so
Third
like
flop
bets?
bets?
Yeah.
So you go. Yeah, we can just go. Let's just go this way. Yeah, it goes him, you, then Liam. Or now it goes.
There's last position.
Jaden is last.
Oh, so it goes you, me,
That's
Christian.
a whole different song.
Him, you, Liam, me, Jaden.
Okay.
Oh,
so
don't
you guys
give
can
me
do
commercials.
Hey, it's second
You
place.
can work in the background while I.
I'm just gonna
I can
type
test
this.
that for Daniel. Oh yeah, isn't this
So these
weird?
are getting organized.
Sadly it is.
Man,
That was sad, Christian.
working hard, I know. I was talking to Christy.
Jaden, you up? Come on, Jaden, sink it.
Oh,
Yeah. No,
It stopped. It didn't sink it, but it stopped.
Knows the arrangement or does all the parts, cause I never heard of her. Holly
here.
Gossett. But, you know, I'm sorry because there's.
Thank
another
goodness
picture
Liam
that
hit it
says,
hard. I did not
"Next
want to
I
have
give
to.
you my Heart Hill song."
Jaden.
Yes! Jaden has a letter. Jaden has a letter. Jaden has a letter.
Doesn't let me fast forward.
Jaden, you're like, yeah, I have a letter. Oh yeah.
Not that I, you know, don't want to hear the whole song, but.
Side shot.
It was a side shot.
You can only do it on the corner.
On the side here.
So Pastor Dick, all the blue taped ones are for the school.
all the blue ones?
not
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's not? It's him. Oh, okay.
Oh yeah.
I'm just so used to him.
I'm just so used to blue tape.
Oh! That's
You
a
might want
letter.
to move a little bit. Like,
Yeah. Is that a letter?
Yeah, I do that in hockey. I do that in hockey.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
move over.
should be
Hard-
right. I'm just gonna get behind here.
You'll be my
How are the
shield.
kids doing on the floor?
Okay, okay, both of you can't shoot this far or anything, so I should be fine over here.
Yeah.
That can't do that far.
I could throw a softball.
I mean, we're not opposed to chairs.
Exactly.
No, they're fine. Flexible.
Oh,
Here.
oh, so that's a D.
Oh, you're
I
out.
was in the middle of the room.
Oh, Christian, you're out. Oh, yeah,
They
you're
made
out.
up a different part.
Yeah, you're up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm up with Liam.
Liam's so good at this game. So I'm have to be mad at me.
I only have a C, right? Or do I even have any letters?
You don't
You
have
have a
a
C. He has a C.
No, I didn't, trust me. You know what? And different people do stuff. There's a song that we do.
Oh, wrong one.
All right, now I have a C off.
I have a CR. You have nothing. Liam,
They did it in
Jaden and I each have CRs.
And
So
it-
we
they
gotta
did it
stop
with a
getting
bunch of
each
kids
other
at
out.
Cancer Ward.
I won't get you out, Christian, if you don't get me out.
Oh,
Ginger! I'm being Ginger!
Oh my goodness, Liam.
Liam, you're just like your brother.
They're
In
violent.
high school, he was popping it up.
That's violent.
Dude, I freaking
Felt that!
it's almost over. It doesn't take that long.
No,
Christian.
Oh, you're not out.
Just so you know.
Oh, watch your face. Oh, yeah, it is.
Don't get me out, I will get you out.
Anyway, and it's a little girl.
I will get Alex out.
Yes.
And, you know, it's a- and it's like
Because
there's
Alex
stories
can't get
that
me
kind
out.
of
Jake,
like
yeah,
give
Jake,
extra.
you're out.
And then in
I'm not
the
going out.
shows go,
Oh,
Not
no,
for you.
Yes, just read you.
narrates scripture
Love
and
me.
stuff.
Why not? Liam's got the look.
Beautiful.
Liam's a big
Sorry, Jaden.
They
CRU.
have a couple.
Jaden used to be
It could be on that.
I
They have a couple. of-
I was waiting you were really gonna win.
Used to be amazing.
Yeah, used to be. But you're still.
Rephrase that.
You're still.
I am amazing.
You're still okay. I'm with you really good.
It's funny that this is out here because there's.
I'm with you really.
Oh.
Jaden!
It didn't go off of it, so technically
Oh,
I'm
they're
just
hot.
stuck in a letter form.
That's true. We'll probably
I hit both of them.
Yes!
Oh.
Get out of here, Jaden.
Yeah, I
I set
used
you up.
to be
Everyone
amazing, Alex.
always trying to take me out.
Because you said I used to be amazing.
Everyone's
I am amazing. Hey, watch the
Scary
fingers.
sometimes. but
No.
Then maybe we shouldn't have put them on the table.
Dang
It
it.
could
Go,
not
Jaden,
take
go.
them off.
No, you didn't do
Common
it.
sense.
Yes.
Yes, Alex, that's you. Why does everyone go for me?
I used to be amazing, Alex.
That's why he's good.
That's why I'm getting you.
Shoes are back
You used
there.
to be. Now you kind of lost it.
Some way.
This is Zach. Look what up.
Yes.
Jaden literally about to stop and it barely went into the side pocket.
Pretty calm.
Oh, that was an accident. Oh yeah, I'm after him.
This is so insane watching people run around the table.
Yes!
You did it!
Yes! I used to be amazing, Alex. I can't help it.
I just like kind of washed up.
Well,
Okay. But like Wednesday, you crushed it now. Wednesday.
Thank you.
What do you have, Jaden?
Yeah, you used to be
Your
amazing.
turn, Liam.
Hallelujah. James though.
You see what I did to
What
him
letter
when
did
he
you
said
have?
that?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, he corrects.
I have CR.
Oh no, miss one more time.
Oh. It went through the box.
Talk
Fine.
about overkill.
Was it eight?
That, like,
He blast that. But what if it would have hit the back? Where's the eight? Yeah, high school came and hit the back and bounced out of me. Especially Mama. Where's Abel?
Christian broke the 8 ball.
Mama and Christian
You
break
lost the 8 ball.
that. Christian breaks
Sean.
everything.
Are you kidding me?
What's going on?
Oh. Whose turn is it? Oh,
You
it's
all hate
James.
me.
I don't hate you, Christian. I tried not to get you out.
I know, but when I sneak it on Liam, you're all like, aw, no. We like Liam more than Christian.
No, I just thought I was sad for Leo. I don't have favorites. I hate you all equally.
Thanks.
You're so
We're
helpful.
good friends. I'm friends since 6th grade.
Very nice.
I've been friends with him since like the
Third grade.
Third grade? No, you came to the street in 5th grade.
5 years.
You really have? I thought you
Okay, so.
Oh,
This does not make the ball fly this time.
because it went into the side pocket. Oh yeah, it was.
And it's CR to CR. Right here.
Who's gonna be?
Oh, you do.
Liam sinks all the time, but it's only in the side.
One more. Oh, yeah. Oh, I did. Oh! Amazing.
Christian's been tampering with the balls. He's been blowing on
Who's
them.
that? Didn't I had to make the three. To make Liam do good.
Yeah.
They missed 9 times. Why? I had to make it.
Oh yeah, they did. That's why they made up that rules. Because every time I
Sorry,
would,
Leo.
it would be like 5
Yeah.
times later, I still wouldn't make it.
Would you try to do something fancy?
No, I just
Jaden.
tried to throw it.
Jaden, I won for us.
Ask Christian. Where they made up the
Yeah,
hit
Christian
rule
told me.
because of me.
Yes, because of you. I was there
That's
when you made it.
okay.
When Caleb made it up.
Oh, evil Caleb.
Caleb's awesome. He gives me
He
free
is
stuff. He gives me free stuff at the snack
Where's
bar.
Okay.
He gave me free money last time.
But James
Why?
got third
Okay,
place.
but it's weird because it was actually my money, but then
Yeah,
he didn't
that's
know it was mine, but he just accounted for it.
Ow!
And he took it and he gave it to
Where's
me
the white
back,
ball?
but I won it.
White
back.
ball's over there.
Seriously? And he didn't give me all of it. I didn't tell him that.
Dude, Jaden.
No, Daniel?
Over here.
Here. I'll play pool.
It's not plugged in. It's not plugged in.
Anything interesting should I know
No, it's not. You
that
can
hits me with any sort of ball.
Christian just.
Yeah, no.
How much did it take you a while, dude?
My hands aren't good enough.
Good morning.
There's more girls than last time.
Oh, you changed the channel? Where's the info box?
Why don't you just try to play it with a white ball so there's not so many.
You're witnessing some amazing skills. They're right here.
So amazing. So amazing.
Something in.
So unmagnificent. It's so unmagnificent. Plugs in to here.
Well, no, it's supposed to plug into the
God.
plug it into the
It was not me.
Trying to take out the wall.
Where?
Good thing it's.
It's a stone wall.
Yeah, stone wall.
Right there.
Good thing it's stone.
Help
or else
speed.
Right?
it could be
Right
bad.
there. Oh my gosh, there's a TV.
For that Violet, you could take out the cabinet.
Pay for it if you do.
Well, it's true. You could take out the
Believe me,
cabinet. Wah, bam! The door falls off.
A better one.
If that actually slipped under it, that would have so hard.
Dana said though. Dana said that.
Plug it into the
Oh,
You missed.
all
There's
three.
like eight of it. You can't just place the player on. Good. It's on. Me and Alex
It's
know
not
how to.
plugged in.
It's not plugged in.
That works.
Oh, yes, one.
Oh my, you're the tech genius here. You can't
You
make
realize the
it
8 ball went in
Yes, I can.
Oh.
before everything else. And that puppy spoke his friend. Maybe you lost the white one.
Sometimes you are
So look at it, so.
There's hard enough to do Really, I teach them. And I can have
I'm a jack of all trades.
I've
Master.
Come on, then we'll be done with this.
Try to do it with your Romanian funsies.
while still spitting.
All the kids are listening.
Oh my gosh.
I'm leaving now.
I am so glad that was a quick
kidding.
pull. Are you trying to make dents in the wall?
No.
This was
Yep.
you didn't agree to that.
Seems like it. I need the chair as a shield. Oh yeah. You might as well just try to get the remaining ones in instead of get like a ton of them out.
Me too.
Then what? Hiya. Sure.
Yeah!
Took you long enough.
I'll do it. Don't make me.
Are you trying to kill someone?
Oh wow, no.
I don't know that.
Whatever, there by the blue book.
Oh, I found. Look out!
It's fun when it's not on. And it's on. Guys, look, it's the controllers. It's controllers.
No, I'm not taking some of them out. You never get them.
I'm gonna take my toe out. Come on. Pretend you're playing
Dude, why is somebody holding it and I lost it?
This kid's throwing balls like they're hot. He's like, what's that? Okay, black ball. Now we need to find white ball.
Oh my goodness. Oh!
Hit the ground. He's dropped so many. The white ball has to be down there. I got brown ball. Lance got the black ball.
How do I know? Yeah.
Oh, what? You suck it.
What? That's a guy.
Liam, can I see the black ball?
I wanna go before Jaden.
Okay, I'll go second.
Lucky bounce. Iris? Yeah, he already called fourth.
Wait, who's first? Second.
Yeah.
Oh.
Wait, do you kind of know what throw the ball at that ball.
Don't give it back.
And do the
Okay,
two corner boxes.
so here's what it is.
And
So,
yours.
you
You
can't
can't
do
do
it
it
on
on
this
this
side
side
right
here.
You can't throw it on the
Let
side.
it
You have to
be
throw
over
on the
here.
long side.
So,
Like,
you can come over and grab it from like over here, but you can't throw it back until you're out. If the ball stops and someone else can
And once it's done, you throw it and you're out.
you can. It's easy.
And also,
but once you start, you
and also, if the person in front of you sinks
Where's
it,
the
then
puck?
you get it.
Alright, it seems like
There's nowhere to be found. Pull her along.
One miss. You had no funny. Wait, you haven't. You haven't.
That was Liam. That was Liam.
Yeah, that's fourth.
Oh, you're fourth.
Okay. Oh no, so I'm after you then. Now you start because you're gonna have letter now. That's you.
Oh, wait, yeah.
Oh, you signed him a letter.
Oh, I have
Yeah.
Yeah, you got me a letter.
Oh, you got picture of that? Oh
Because I
yeah, you
grabbed
suck
it
it.
out of turn. No, because I grabbed it out. That was just a reach of
Oh,
all
you broke it.
No, that came out somewhere.
Oh, I thought you
No, you need all of us. Alright, letter for Alec and me and.
Yeah, I think I'll let.
Yeah, you have no letter.
Jaden.
Also, if one of the balls is off the table, you can.
Jane, you want to see what was wrong?
Yes!
This.
No.
What is
Oh!
Because this was not in the room, remember? So, like, this couldn't have been.
Everything's moved around.
That
I
is,
can't find it.
oh my gosh,
You
that is
missed
way
it.
too many
You
clubs
messed
for
up
one
the
device.
sequence, man.
Sorry.
You should be sorry, Daniel. We're gonna get punished.
So, what do we got? One mic.
Punish. Punish. Pound it on his head.
It stopped on Jaden.
Yeah.
And he's missing a lot, so he's.
I'm in yellow.
So now it's there.
score
Yeah.
yourself? How do you score yourself that bad?
But you know, I like how they're just sitting around the video games like they're actually.
Turn on, I will support.
Oh no, I'm
All the two. Ow!
Oh yeah, I got your That's
You made one.
a you.
One.
Oh,
It didn't go off the table. I did that too.
This is it.
No, you can't do it.
You can be on.
Hook up while you're-
You can accuse me.
We're good. We'll have some sound. We'll have our
Yes.
Oh. That is fucking damn.
So now it's your turn, Craig. You hit it.
God. You tried to aim for
And
someone's
turn.
head?
I'm
So me? Oh.
You suck over there. You're like,
Violent.
sweet.
This is not worth it.
Finally.
No,
Wait, so now it's your turn. You're hitting it a little on the side. Try to get it more like the Liam's do.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, you guys turn around, close your eyes,
Yeah.
and Tristan, you're gonna have the top.
That'll be part of the Saturday, Friday, whatever.
Oh, we got it.
Excellent.
Violence is not the answer.
No, no, not
Go on this side.
Here.
Now you just try to hit it.
Hit blue chair?
Yeah.
That's not ours.
He only has to
I
hit
thought you used it to watch them.
I know, but can we put it back? Thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Well, these aren't the
She's
chairs
so
that are
not
sitting
fair.
where
Jesus is
are
gonna get
they?
out before you.
Andrew's bringing them out.
I naturally thought the chairs were
I have no microphone sound there.
No, you scored on yourself. That's -1.
There we go. It wasn't
Yes.
Take it
Perfect.
automatic.
Check.
Yes! Shit on wire. Chick on wire. Chick. Oh, that was high. Oh, that's a letter. So he's out. Alright, so now it's Liam's turn. Liam's second. You gotta get Liam out.
Nice. Cheers.
If I throw it from here and it goes in, I
We
would
good?
laugh so hard.
Okay,
It
cool.
would be
Thanks.
hilarious.
We'll mix this guitar on the
If this goes in, I will laugh.
Want me to play it for you?
Oh, no.
yeah, if you just want to play it real fast, I can
Okay, so
kind
you
of
have
memorize
to-
it.
Yeah!
So, the new placement of the air hockey table, where should I set it? Essentially, they would do this. Straight line, like
I haven't
eight,
seen
or so.
it.
Well, we don't have all of our kids. You know, like when we only have like 16 out of 24. And Norbert
Jake,
was
Mike.
to steal what we had to do. Huh?
Risky.
Steal what we had
Yes,
to.
finally.
When was Bud gonna steal? I don't know, Norbert came up with
You're
it.
evil! I didn't do it on purpose!
I used to
Okay,
figure
sure,
out
well,
that like
they were, but that's interesting.
No!
I'll talk to people. We're getting
That's
whipped
so
around.
dumb.
Oh, that's
Stop.
insane.
I'm just standing here.
So yeah,
And then I
just
tripped
kind of
like
like
this.
this, like between the tables, as if the tables were like two sides of a box.
Then I tripped
Yeah,
like
like
this.
better standing.
I already did
Yeah,
that.
over a
Cheater.
Yeah.
Okay.
I usually stand in this vicinity.
Purposefully set above.
It's usually
Oh,
me.
one.
Oh yeah, that's my friend
Roundiness.
Chris. Or
Kind of like a quarter circle.
dude, no, it didn't even
Okay.
make it
They did a horseshoe on Wednesday, which is not my favorite. But
in. You're evil,
it
you
works
caused me.
Don't pull on the plastic part, then it's not ready to come off.
no.
Yes. That was not a yes or no question.
Where'd it go?
Right, I'm out. It's a winner. I got third place.
Alright, well, we are gonna try and keep the pucks inside the
I got
space.
fourth place.
Yeah,
Oh, I got fifth. You won.
First, second.
Second.
I got fifth.
I called on first. No, you got not Liam. You got fourth now.
Here, I'll trade places.
Okay, good.
I'm second.
right, your high score because you started before me. Yeah, that's
I'm not after
you start before. That's like
Just
amazing.
like this. Kind of quarter circle.
Thank you, Robin and Liam.
No, Jaden, don't sink it on you.
Well,
Okay,
I wouldn't sink it on you.
I was just thinking.
It's his turn.
That was oh, it wasn't.
You almost grabbed it.
I almost grabbed it. Oh wait, did you get it on me?
No.
No, it's his. He got a C.
Plus, these are back here. Because I did set up more chairs.
Are you gonna say
I think in case of emergency though, but I'd say chairs down to the carpet.
Okay.
Oh wait, it's not me. Yes, I'm not after me.
See, I could have easily slumped you.
And then probably like
Christian, I got your back.
I feel like
It's your turn, kid.
kid.
No, it's off to the side. And you got a letter.
What?
You're on the side right here. That was right.
Exactly, I was right here.
Oh, you want to just redo that? Yeah, that's what you do. That can go 50-50, so that's what you do. So no letter. So no letter, but so this is kind of what you do. Oh, thank you, Liam! Thank you, Liam. Oh, respect. I thought it was my turn.
Does this look good, Danielle?
Oh,
Yeah, great.
did it?
All right, everybody, find a seat on a chair. It is white. It's moving.
If you don't want to sit on a chair.
What
Then find a seat on a chair.
Yeah, I have to put mine in.
What happens if you find a seat on the couches?
I would have to do
The
C.
couch
Now,
No, come on.
Hey, I'll just sit on it.
And the back row choosing has begun.
That's funny.
Rock and roll, baby.
Just enough for the ladies. That's funny. Alrighty. Cool. Hi guys. Daniel, could you open us in prayer?
I think I can.
Cool.
Lord, we thank you for all that you provided for us. Thank you for what you're doing right now in our lives. And help us, Lord, to just think on these things as we lift up your name, as we praise you. We ask that in your Son's precious name.
There is joy in the Lord. There is love in His Spirit. There is hope in the knowledge of Him. And there's a fountain that flows like a river from heaven, abounding in love to my soul. All blessing and honor are His, and all glory and power are His. Let all wisdom and strength be the Lord's in this place, and let all glory be given to Him. 'Cause there is joy in the Lord, there is love in His Spirit, there is hope in the knowledge of Him. And there's a fountain I know every time I am near it. My heart overflows to the Lord. All blessing and honor are His, and all glory and power are His. Let all wisdom and strength be the Lord's in this place, and let I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, when my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Sing Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Sing Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, you are welcomed here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. So let us become more aware. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Holy Spirit, you are welcomed here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Jesus, Lord of heaven, I do not deserve the grace that you have given, or the promise of your word. Lord, I stand in wonder at the sacrifice you made, with mercy beyond measure. My debt you freely paid. Your love is deeper than any ocean, higher than the heavens reaches, beyond the stars in the sky. Jesus, your love has no bounds. Jesus, your love has no bounds. Jesus, Lord of heaven, I do not deserve the grace that you have given, or the promise of your word. Lord, I stand in wonder at the sacrifice you made, mercy beyond measure. My debt you freely paid. Your love is deeper than any ocean, higher than the heavens reaches, beyond the stars in the sky. So your love is deep, your love is wide. Your love is deep, your love is wide. Your love is great, your love is high. Your love is all we ever need. Your love is all we ever need. Your love is deep, your love is wide. Your love is great, your love is high. Your love is all we ever need. Your love is all we ever need. Your love is deeper than any ocean, higher than the heavens reaches, beyond the stars in the sky. Jesus, your love has no bounds. 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 Lord, I thank you so much for this time. I thank you for every single person here, Lord. I just thank you for bringing them here safely, Lord. I pray as always, Lord, you'd bless this time as we get into your word. And as always, you'd speak through Daniel as he teaches. Lord, just open our hearts, soften them, open our ears to hear what you have to say, God. Just bless this time we have together in our fellowship with our brothers and sisters in Christ. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Lexi. Thank you, Liam.
Thank you.
Good, you guys. I did the phone bucket. Anybody join late? Get an extra phone? Is that a yes? You have.
I don't have an extra phone. I feel like you're scaring them, Andrew. Phones for the poor. Phones for the needy.
Donations or
Phones
accepting
just for
phone
me because
donations?
I could use another phone. No?
Ooh, I'll take the phone.
All right, everybody needs a Bible. Get a Bible.
A Bible box.
Christian, can you get me a Bible? No. Aww.
Yes, I totally will.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Liam did it.
Like this stuff.
Yeah. Liam's got
Good.
one.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Why do you like
Bible?
this?
Because when
But
school's
Liam's a better
here,
friend.
I feel like that is an innate, like, off-putting
Oh,
for
he'll
this.
steal
Well, okay.
Because, I mean, I imagine
You
how
think
you
this is
heard it
It is-
before
it
it
is-
starts.
It is a humongous toy for all children. There's never an age group that will actually respect this and not play with it.
He was sitting
That is fair.
They're so fun.
Does anyone know
Visually.
any
You can
age
tell me
children
it's
that
okay.
wouldn't
It's
play
okay.
with
It goes over
that?
there.
What age would not play with that?
My little brother.
Really? How old is he?
5.
I just poured coffee all over my shoe.
Hey.
Brilliant.
Good for you. Got it too.
Not
Hey.
the shoe.
I didn't stain the floor. Ah.
Yeah.
Extra hard.
Yeah, excellent job. You didn't stand
Just
the
have
floor.
stained shorts and socks now.
Hey, you can always.
Why you
steal
never
some
wear a
stained
white
socks.
I'm
You
not
can't
wearing
put
white.
You can't put
It's
the floor in
coffee.
the washing
It will
machine.
stain anything not darker than coffee.
Oh, forgot.
It's the same color as coffee.
You can put.
Can
You
someone
can't
turn
put
the lights
the
on?
floor in the
Oh,
washing
that
machine.
can
Unless
see.
you cut
Your
the
wish
piece
is
out.
But they're not light.
Put it in the washing machine. And then tape it back and stitch it.
Oh!
What?
Purple's yellow, yellow's purple. Now it all makes sense.
What?
I kept trying to get it right, and I couldn't get it right.
I kept hearing Lexi's ukulele just.
Purple is literally plugged into yellow, and yellow is literally plugged into purple.
I know.
It's all so clear now.
That I will take blame for that.
Purple, yellow, colorblind?
I am not.
Let's see what
That
it's
is a
plug
new
yellow
kind
into
of
purple.
colorblind. I
She
didn't know
made me
existed.
do it.
I did not do it on purpose. I am sorry.
That's okay. I'm not upset in any way.
Actually,
I'm elated
Let's
that I
see
am
his
not
evil.
crazy.
You're not crazy.
Yay!
Like
I
something
wasn't
was
paying
crazy.
attention.
Because, like, you know, we had that whole discussion at the beginning, so I felt very firm.
Yeah.
Very firm
Yeah, it
on
was,
what was what.
Well, yellow was already
Guys, do we
flipped
have?
into purple.
Oh, and a coffee chair. Okay, I was gonna say we have the exact number of chairs.
Yes.
That's just weird. It worked out though. Very cool. Yes.
Yellow's already plugged into purple.
So you just
So
didn't
I
even
just
change
didn't
it. You
look
just
at
plugged
it.
in the
I
next
just
thing.
plugged in the next. Yeah.
That
She
makes
usually
sense.
uses
I can
yellow
understand that. All right, guys. Today we're gonna
Done.
try and do 3 chapters of Daniel, and we don't have nearly enough time to do 1 chapter. So this is how this is gonna play out. We're gonna do chapter 10 and 12 without stopping. Chapter 11 is the only one we're gonna spend time on. So chapter 10, chapter 12. If you have questions, you can stop me. Otherwise, I'm just gonna pretend you all understand everything we read. How about that? Yeah.
Nothing.
Ah, that's
You're
just
trying to make
mean.
you stop.
All right, so Daniel chapter 10. It is on page 735.
I lost my page and I'm
735. Do you have a real question?
No.
Then don't put your hand up. Yes.
I forgot the timeline, like the big scale. This stuff is after David, Solomon, and then like the split.
Oh, the big
of-
timeline. Yes.
Yes. This is after
Yes.
the Israel Judah.
This is
split.
this is post kings of Israel.
Gotcha.
Any
Okay.
king of Israel is pre this.
And then the countries come in.
Yeah, so they don't ever get to have a ruler again. Until modern day history, like in the late 60s. Like that's when they finally get to have government. Up until like this last century, it's all other people running their country.
Where's 10?
Yeah. Does that make sense?
I was thinking of something else.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
That's cool.
I was thinking when Israel became a nation again.
Right.
That date was.
68.
It was?
1968.
Oh.
This is last century. Yeah.
Have the Israelites gotten back to their land yet?
Ah, very good question.
I can't remember.
Very
exactly
good question.
from last
We're going to read chapter 10. It'll put us on the timeline. We'll put the timeline on the screen. We'll answer that question. All right, without further ado, Daniel chapter 10. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Cyrus of Persia, Daniel, also known as Belteshazzar, still had another vision. He understood that the vision concerned events certain to happen in the future, times of war and great hardship. When this vision came to me, I, Daniel, had been in mourning for 3 whole weeks. All that time I had eaten no rich food, no meat or wine had crossed my lips, and I used no fragrant lotions until those 3 weeks had passed. It's like a fast from fancy stuff instead of a fast from all things. Verse 4. On April 23rd, as I was standing on the bank of the great Tigris River, I looked up and saw a man dressed in linen clothing with a belt of pure gold around his waist. His body looked like a precious gem. His face flashed like lightning, and his eyes flamed like torches. His arms and feet shone like polished bronze, and his voice roared like a vast multitude of people. If you're not familiar, verses 4 through 6 perfectly reflect Revelation's description of what Jesus looks like when you get to see him in glory, as opposed to what he looks like when you see him as a human being. And so we have here not named, but perfectly every single detail described, Jesus Christ, which is pretty cool because this is Old Testament. All right, verse 7. Only I, Daniel, saw this vision. The men with me saw nothing, but they were suddenly terrified and ran away to hide. So I was left there all alone to see this amazing vision. My strength left me, my face grew deathly pale, and I felt very weak. Then I heard the man speak, and when I heard the sound of his voice, I fainted and lay there with my face to the ground. Just then a hand touched me and lifted me, still trembling, to my hands and knees. And the man said to me, Daniel, you are very precious to God. So listen carefully to what I have to say to you. Stand up, for I have been sent to you. When he said this to me, I stood up, trembling. Then he said, don't be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day you began to pray for understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your request has been heard in heaven. I have come in answer to your prayer. But for 21 days, the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia blocked my way. Then Michael, one of the archangels, came to help me, and I left him there with the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia.
Now I am here to explain what will happen to your people in the future, for this vision concerns a time yet to come. While he was speaking to me, I looked down at the ground, unable to say a word. Then the one who looked like a man touched my lips, and I opened my mouth and began to speak. I said to the one standing in front of me, I am filled with anguish because of the vision I have seen, my Lord, and I am very weak. How can someone like me, your servant, talk to you, my Lord? My strength is gone, and I can hardly breathe. Then the one who looked like a man touched me again, and I felt my strength returning. Don't be afraid, he said, for you are very precious to God. Peace, be encouraged, be strong. As he spoke these words, I suddenly felt stronger and said to him, please speak to me, my Lord, for you have strengthened me. He replied, do you know why I have come? Soon I must return to fight against the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia, and after that the spirit prince of the kingdom of Greece will come. Meanwhile, I will tell you what is written in the book of truth. No one helps me against these spirit princes except Michael, your spirit prince. Another possible verse that could slip in here, depending on which translation you're looking at, it could be, I have been standing beside Michael to support and strengthen him since the first year of the reign of Darius the Mede. All right. Weird dispersion of the chapter there, and that just comes down to different copies of the book of Daniel have the split after that verse, and different copies of the book of Daniel have the split before that verse. And later translators, more recent translators, they think that verse should totally be the end of chapter 10 and totally not the beginning of chapter 11. It doesn't really matter. It was all one book at one point. It doesn't have any chapters in it at the beginning. All right, so today we're looking at 3 chapters, and the reason is because chapter 10, if you were following all of that, is an introduction with no middle and no end. It starts, and it does a great job of starting, but it doesn't do anything after it starts. It just says, I'm going to tell you stuff. And then that's it. You're kind of left hanging. So we're doing 3 chapters today because I don't want you guys to just have that, and that's it. Goodbye. See you next week. Hope you're all here so you can actually find out what he says. We're actually going to go through all of it. So Jaden was curious, when is this happening? This is going to be 3rd year of Darius, and so therefore we're looking at 536 BC, and this would be, and Jaden, this is why your question is so pertinent, immediately after the first people are given permission, but before most people ever get to go. So weird thing when you're dealing with thousands and thousands of people switching countries all of a sudden. It doesn't happen in one day. And so yeah, this is after that point where it starts, but it's before that point where it ends. And this is very, very close to the beginning. So almost no one's got to go back yet. Only like 1 or 2 little groups. No big groups. Exploratory groups. The first leader of the first little group is still going to come back after this and say, hey, we should all go. And then he'll get like a bunch more people. That all comes later. And if you're looking at the books here, you can see that the book of Ezra has already started on the timeline. The book of Ezra starts as the beginning of all those movements start. But the book of Ezra is the first 2 groups. And so they haven't even got the first or second group to go yet. So yeah, still coming up in the future. They have permission, they haven't gone. Only like Ezra and a few people have actually gone out to just check out the land and see what's up. That's it. So, Darius/Cyrus, he's like 64. Daniel's old, he's like 84. This is after the Lion's Den incident. Lion's Den incident was in like the 1st or 2nd year. This is the 3rd year that Darius is the reigning emperor of the Medo-Persian Empire. And so as Daniel gets this vision, he is getting essentially, here in chapter 11, as we pick up in this next chapter, the most detailed prophecy in the entire Bible. Nothing is this detailed and self-explanatory. Nothing. Every other prophecy is good. It's great, don't get me wrong. But nothing is this detailed and self-explanatory at all. Nothing even comes close. This is the most well-understandable prophecy in the entire Bible. And so I stayed up all night to get you guys the details so we can go through these quickly and just kind of rattle them off. And so I, to be honest, am not super familiar with this period of history. And if you guys have random questions for me, I might not be able to answer them. What I know has been condensed onto these slides because there is a lot going on at this period of history. And it's because it's right as the Greco-Macedonian Empire splits into 4. Suddenly there's like 4 completely different timelines all happening at once. And it just gets nuts to try and follow everything. Because it's 4 different kingdoms, 4 different kings, 4 different governments, 4 different areas. Everything is times 4. So it becomes very difficult to follow. Nicely, 2 of them are small. This one right here, the one I've deleted out because it's not even in the Bible's prophecies. They don't get mentioned very much. They don't really do much with the other 2 big ones. So it's like these 2 big ones, they stay together and they do stuff together. They fight each other. They're friends with each other. And then these 2 are friends with each other and fight each other. It's almost like the country split in half and then split in half again. And those separate halves kind of stay separate. Anyways, so Daniel chapter 11, starting up in verse 2, because if you're holding the same Bible as me, that's actually where the chapter starts. Now then, I will reveal the truth to you. 3 more Persian kings will reign, to be succeeded by a 4th, far richer than the others. He will use his wealth to stir up everyone to fight against the kingdom of Greece. Now, if you ever want to read history and laugh, go back and read about Xerxes when he tries to conquer Greece. Oh my gosh, this guy, he's so insane, he's so colorful, he's so ridiculous. This guy is the one who inspires that really terrible movie, never go see it, 300. Because he's so flamboyant and over the top about the way he goes and starts wars and fights, like people wrote novels. They wrote stories about him, and they are still doing it. They're still writing stories about him. At one point, when he tries to cross the strait to get into Macedonia, the water is not polite. It's a storm, and it destroys the ropes that hold up this like natural fiber rope bridge. And a bunch of his troops fall in the water and they can't cross. And he gets so upset, he decrees that the strait, this body of water, shall be whipped 100 times and put in shackles. And so his men are literally commanded and have to go down to the water with whips, get in the water, and whip the strait with whips. And then they take fetters, iron fetters, and they put them in the strait because you can't actually clamp them around the strait. So you literally just throw them in the strait, and then he was appeased. He was okay. Yeah. Showed that water. That's right. That is Xerxes. He's a nut job. He is crazy. But he's hilarious. So he tries to conquer Macedonia. He gets in there eventually, not day one. Day one, storm and whipping. But later he does get into Macedonia, and he never conquers it. He tries and tries and tries. He's in the area long enough, he builds monuments. He's so sure of himself, yeah, this place is mine. And then he's not. He loses. He has to leave. I think he dies by falling off a horse. And he's not even at war. It's not in the middle of a fight. He's at home, goes to ride his horse for the day, and just whoops, and then dies.
That's just stupid.
The
what?
way to die.
How does he even die?
I just don't even understand. Probably fell on his head or something. I don't know. So, yeah, Xerxes, hilarious. But what happens because of him is he gets Macedonia all kind of freaked out by this part of the empire. And this is important because this is pre-Alexander the Great, pre-Greco-Macedonian Empire. What Xerxes doesn't realize is he set up the culture in Macedonia that would produce Alexander the Great. The culture of Macedonia was, we must have a military as strong as an empire, so that when empires come against us, we can beat them. This is what Xerxes did. He didn't realize it, but this is what he did. He got Macedonia growing in military strength. Originally, they beat him because they were better, smarter, prepared, dug in, they knew the land, all that. But they decided we need to have an army of the same size as an empire. And that's kind of crazy for a singular country. But they started this. And a few years goes by, and you get to Alexander the Great. And suddenly there's an army when he grows up, and he takes command of it, and the rest is, history. But the Bible actually predicted this. Because remember, Daniel wrote this book. He gets this vision all the way back here. It's back off the timeline to the left. So he's writing all this stuff in advance. Check out verses 3 and 4. chapter 11, verses 3 and 4. Then a mighty king will rise to power, who will rule with great authority and accomplish everything he sets out to do. But at the height of his power, his kingdom will be broken apart and divided into 4 parts. It will not be ruled by the king's descendants, nor will the kingdom hold the authority it once had, for his empire will be uprooted and given to others. Now this is true. It eventually comes into 4 large pieces, but those 4 large pieces can't even maintain power and are constantly losing and gaining again and losing and gaining again little sections of land to other people who said, no, I'm the true successor of Alexander the Great. And so there's like this whole area of archaeology where people just try and find more successors to Alexander the Great. It's its own class of archaeology because of how many there are. There are now hundreds of people who claim to have succeeded Alexander the Great, and all they really did was take over a piece of his empire. Sometimes it was a single town. Sometimes it was a whole country. Occasionally you got more than one country, and those are the 4 dudes. It's the green section here, the little black section I whited out, this tan section, and this dark gray section here. Those 4 big ones were the ones that kind of flooded back and forth and tried to gobble up all the little tiny ones. They're the ones who got to keep the big pieces. And they were all generals of Alexander's original army. And so that fulfills that prophecy. All right, check out verse 5. Verse 5 says, the king of the south will increase in power, but one of his own officials will become more powerful than he and will rule his kingdom with great strength. Now, it's not accurate to think of the 4 generals who take over Alexander's kingdom as like meeting up the day he dies and being like, so us 4, right? Yeah, okay, cool. And then like they go and they rule their own quarters of the kingdom. It's not like that. They all 4 of them fought tooth and nail. They all 4 of them had to be conniving and cunning and make deals with people to get their kingdom. And it didn't all happen on the same day. It happened over the few years following Alexander's death. And so for a time, this great kingdom up here was not all one kingdom. It was 2 for a bit, and then eventually became 1. And that happened with the help of the guy who got Egypt. Egypt was ruled by Ptolemy. Ptolemy the First, to be precise. He is the king of the south. Now this term, king of the south, and later we'll read another term, king of the north, is going to get used again and again and again throughout chapter 11. But it is not a specific king. It's not like God's just hiding some one guy's name. Like, I don't want to say the word Dave, so I'm just going to call him king of the south. It's not like that. What it is that God is actually detailing the future of this little tiny section right in the middle. Does anyone know what is right here on the map? There's Egypt, there's Mesopotamia, there's Asia Minor. What's right here, this little tiny bridge? Oh, you know what that is? It's on the coast of the Mediterranean here. Yeah?
It's a part of Mesopotamia.
It's Israel. That little section there. Notice it's 2 colors. This is what kills me. Okay? Of all the places in the world that could be contested, that could be fought over, it had to be Israel, right? So this little blue section right here is Israel. This little gray section right here is Israel. Both empires simultaneously held control of Israel for a large period of time, and they fought each other over and over and over again in Israel because this was the point where their kingdoms met. Now, once, maybe even twice, if I'm getting my memories not mixed up, they fought up north along this border. But most of their battles over the years between multiple kings of this empire, the battles were fought right here in Israel. And so Israel was torn up by war, even though they weren't at war. They were getting told, I own you now. Okay. And then another king comes from the south. I own you now. And they're like, okay. And then another king comes from the north. Well, I own you now. And they're like, well, okay. You guys, we don't care. Just, if you want to fight south of us, you want to fight north of us, that'd be great. But they just keep fighting right there in Israel. So what happens here is interesting. This great part hasn't become a proper empire yet. Ptolemy has this friend named Seleucus. And Ptolemy, king of the south, helps Seleucus become king of the north. He does not realize he is setting up his rival. All that stuff I'm telling you is going to happen between Ptolemy and Seleucus and their descendants. He helps his friend get on the throne, and this starts the rivalry. They now fight over the land that sits between them. For, let's see, starts here, ends there. So just over 100 years. Hey, bud, you want to be king? Yeah, sure, that'd be great. Helps them become king. It's not like they'll fight, right?
Of course
It
not.
didn't go that way.
Never did.
All right, check out the next set of verses. Where are we at? 6 through, oh no, just 6, my bad. All right, chapter 11, verse 6. Some years later, an alliance will be formed between the king of the north and the king of the south. The daughter of the king of the south will be given in marriage to the king of the north to secure the alliance. And so will her father. Oh, I skipped a line. I'm like, why doesn't that make any sense? To secure the alliance, but she will lose her influence over him, her husband, and so will her father. So her father will lose influence over that guy. She will be abandoned along with her supporters. Sorry to confuse you guys so thoroughly. So this is kind of how it breaks down. Peace treaties called for. Antiochus II is the king up here in the north at this period in history. Notice we've jumped really far from the last verse. Verse 5 was back here. Verse 6 is up here. So Antiochus II, he's king up north. Ptolemy II, he's king down south. Ptolemy II sends his daughter, Berenice, up to marry Antiochus II. She marries him. He's already married. So he puts away, that's a terrible term, but that's the way the history books say it. He puts away his previous wife.
So he cheats.
No. This is a technical term. It means I'm divorcing you for a season.
What?
I don't think you could really insult someone deeper than that. Honey, it's not really a great time to be married. We're just going to not be married for now.
What?
Abraham tried to pull one of these. So yeah, anyways, Antiochus II does this. It backfires because when Ptolemy II dies, he thinks, oh, cool, I'm in the clear. I don't need to stay married to his daughter anymore. Because he's dead, he won't notice. So he's going to divorce, Ptolemy II's daughter, Berenice, and he's just going to, get back his old wife because, he actually likes her. So he tries to do this, and old wife comes back and says, hi, honey, nice to see you. And I'm going to shake a little poison in your dinner tonight. I'm also going to make sure that someone else shakes a little poison in that tramp's food, the one you were married to for a few years, and her kids, so that there's no heirs from her side of the family. Yeah. So king dies, temporary wife dies, children of temporary wife dies, and guess who gets to sit on the throne?
No one.
Original wife. Original wife takes the throne, and she keeps it for a while, and her kids get to continue the family line as kings.
Because that wasn't obvious that she was taking people out.
Oh, yeah, but she's taking people out. What are you going to do? Like, say something? She'll take you out.
She'll poison your food. You never know when it'll happen.
This is all, like, royal drama, and these royal people have, like, hundreds and hundreds of guards who just do what they say because they're royal. So it's very hard to get to them and then take them out, unless you yourself are royal.
It's amazing.
Then you have your own loyal guards who are loyal to you. Anyways, yeah.
Is it Donald Trump royal?
No, nope. We don't have royalty, which is
He has
great.
money. A lot of
It's
moolah.
very similar, actually, but
Moolah.
luckily not exactly the same. All right, so moving on, verse 6, on to verses 7 and 8. But when one of her, this is Berenice, that's the her, one of Berenice's relatives becomes king in the south, he will raise up an army and enter the fortress of the king of the north and defeat him. When he returns to Egypt, he will carry back their idols with him, along with priceless articles of gold and silver. For some years afterward, he will leave the king of the north alone. And this, again, bears true. Berenice's brother, Ptolemy III, he was the king of the south when she died, because remember, her dad was already dead. He was the king he waged war against the north from 246 to 241 BC to avenge her death. So it was just a personal vendetta war. He did get some other stuff done. He got some territory back that they had stolen in the last fight. He got a bunch of artifacts back that were stolen back like 524 BC, like off the charts. These things were stolen hundreds of years ago. And what this did was interesting because he's not even Egyptian. He's actually Greek. He's in charge of Egypt because of the whole Alexander the Great conquering the whole world thing. He's not even Egyptian. Why does he go through the trouble of tracking down Egyptian artifacts all over the known world and bringing them back? Because the priests in Egypt are Egyptian, and if the priests like you, you get to stay alive and stay king longer. This is all good. So he tracks down artifacts, brings them back. He's heralded. They sing songs about him. They write legends about him. They make him a god. They make him a pharaoh. They love this guy because he did stuff that the priests of Egypt liked. So, smart guy. Not stupid. Pretty smart. And again, all prophesied in the book of Daniel hundreds of years before it even happened. Just like simple little tiny facts like, oh yeah, and while he's off at war, he'll collect artifacts and bring them back home. Whoa. Little things like that. God just felt the need to put that in there in the details. All right, check out verse 9. Later the king of the north will invade the realm of the king of the south, but will soon return to his own land. Okay. Although he did not enter Egypt itself, Seleucus II regained control of northern Syria and Phoenicia from Ptolemy III. So right after Ptolemy III goes and avenges his sister's honor, he goes home because things in Egypt are at unrest and he has to go manage the kingdom. His wife was left in charge while he was gone, and things started getting out of hand. Once he goes back, the brave and mighty Seleucus II just takes back the land that they lost during the last war. Doesn't go any further, doesn't cross the border, just goes back and plants his flag and says, "It's mine again." This is basically their history, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Then we get to verses 10 through 12. Verses 10 through 12 say, "However, the sons of the king of the north will assemble a mighty army that will advance like a flood and carry the battle as far as the enemy's fortress. Then, in a rage, the king of the south will rally against the vast forces assembled by the king of the north and will defeat them. After the enemy army is swept away, the king of the south will be filled with pride and will execute many thousands of his enemies, but his success will be short-lived." So, again, we actually see this bear true once again. We see a new character come on the scene, and this guy stays king for quite some time. His dad was that weak king I was talking about who only took back what he just lost, didn't go any further. Antiochus III, no weak dude. This guy was serious, and he kept the kingdom for a lot of years. He launches an expedition into Phoenicia and Palestine, trying to finally get back the Holy Land. This turns out to be a lot harder than he realized, but he doesn't give up. He keeps on fighting. He suffers a huge setback at the Battle of Raphia, and then he has to kind of run away, because Ptolemy IV beat him. Even though Ptolemy IV had a smaller army, he just decides, we're retreating. But he doesn't sit still. He actually has more he wants to do. And so just a few short years later, check it out in verses 13 through 16. A few years later, the king of the north will return with a fully equipped army far greater than before. At that time, there will be a general uprising against the king of the south. Violent men among your own people. So remember, this is talking to Daniel. So violent men among the Israelites, because Jaden's question was important. When are they going back to their land? Well, they went back to their land in this silver bar here. They're already back in their land by the end of the silver bar. And now we're way out here. So Israel's filled with Israelites. So as they're now waging this war, the north country and the south country, they're waging it in Israel. They have to be around Israelites to do it. And while the war's going on, suddenly the Israelites decide, finally, enough is enough. All the back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. They pick a side. And they're like, we don't like you, king of the south. And they start fighting against the king of the south. So now the king of the south is kind of surrounded. He's being hit by the Israelites, who are locals, and he's being hit by the king of the north, who has a big, giant, ridiculous army.
Oh, man.
It doesn't look good, and it turns out not to be good. All right, keep going. We read verse 13. We read verse 14. Oh, we didn't finish 14. Violent men among your own people will join them in fulfillment of this vision, but they will not succeed. Verse 15, then the king of the north will come and lay siege to a fortified city and capture it. The best troops of the south will not be able to stand in the face of the onslaught. The king of the north will march onward unopposed. None will be able to stop him. He will pause in the glorious land of Israel, intent on destroying it. So, king of the north, not really thankful that the Israelites softened up the king of the south. He doesn't really care. He doesn't see that as them being helpful. He sees it as subjects being unruly. And so he wants to whip them into shape. He doesn't spend a ton of time on this effort, but he does kind of start the idea within his kingdom that Israel needs to be kept under close watch. They need to be kept under the kingdom's thumb. They cannot be allowed to kind of have their way. And this lends itself to what comes right around the corner. Check out verse 17. Verse 17, he will make plans to come with the might of his entire kingdom and will form an alliance with the king of the south. He will give him a daughter in marriage in order to overthrow the kingdom from within. But his plan will fail. This actually is true as well. This is Cleopatra I, not the famous Cleopatra. This is confusing. If you go do a Wikipedia search for Cleopatra, you'll see that little link at the top of like every Cleopatra article. It says Cleopatra, disambiguation. You guys ever seen disambiguation? No? Yes? It means click here to see how many things called the same thing exist. So if you type in Cleopatra on Wikipedia and then you click Cleopatra disambiguation, you'll see the list of all the Cleopatras. And little mini descriptions. You can try and figure out which one you're thinking of. Well, chances are you're never thinking of this one. This Cleopatra is not terribly famous, but she does have something of note happen in her life. She's married off to Ptolemy V. Ptolemy V took the throne at age 4. His country goes to war with Antiochus III while he's on the throne. They were already at war previously under the last king, when he's 7. And the warring stops 2 years later when he's 9 because Antiochus III proposes marriage to his daughter, Cleopatra, who is also 9. So probably the least creepy of all creepy marriages in history. Marrying off his 9-year-old daughter to the 9-year-old king.
What actual 9-year-old?
Way to go, Dad of the Year.
Dad.
Yeah. So he thinks this is going to work out really well. I'll send in my 9-year-old daughter to woo the 9-year-old king, try and keep that 9-year-old king on my side. Turns out the 2 9-year-olds just flat out fall in love, and they don't care about whose dad is who. They just like each other. And so the whole plan backfires, and she's just a good queen. She just totally loves her 9-year-old boo. That's all she cares about at that point. She's like, Dad, you're weird. Why did you marry me off at 9? But yeah, so they kind of live happily ever after, and Antiochus III's like, what? I thought I had this all figured out.
Not really.
No, not quite. All right, that is verse 17. I just think it's hilarious that he was like this great and mighty, intelligent general guy who always won fights and did everything great, and then end of his life, 2 big mistakes. Mistake number 1, marrying off his 9-year-old daughter. Mistake number 2, picking a fight with Rome right as Rome is just starting to get some power. He's just kind of not winning in the south and decides, I'll go north! And just starts fighting Rome in the north. And, well, that doesn't go so well. So check out verses 18 through 19. After this, he will turn his attention to the coastland and conquer many cities. But a commander from another land will put an end to his insolence and cause him to retreat in shame. He will take refuge in his own fortress, but will stumble and fall and be seen no more. So yeah, second guy to die by tripping. Not great. First guy trips off his horse. This guy just trips. Not great. All right. Interestingly enough, this actually sets up future events in Israel. I know this is weird, but follow me on this. Antiochus III loses so badly to the Romans that the Romans basically sit him down and say, here's what's going to happen, Antiochus III. You're going to give us everything you've got right here that you were fighting with. We want all your elephants. We want all your ships. We want 20 of your favorite people, including like some of his kids. They take him as hostages. And it's like this. Antiochus, you come fight us again, we'll just start executing the 20 people you love one at a time. We're just going to keep them on standby in case you get any ideas. That was Rome. They did not mess around. And then on top of it, they do this. They're like, you know what? Just because we don't like you, you owe us $10 billion.
Dang, dude.
And you're just going to pay us back $10 billion until you're done. And we don't care how long it takes. Well,
ridiculous.
my life stinks. So Antiochus III goes back home. He trips and dies. And then Rome says to his kid, who's now the king, you still owe us the money. Get us the money. It's like The Godfather before Italy even had a mob. I don't even understand. So it's basically the mob. So his son now has to pay back the $10 billion. So his son's kingdom has one notable quality in all of history: high taxes. That is the notable quality. And I love it. God prophesies this. Check this out. Look at verse 20. His successor will send out a tax collector to maintain the royal splendor. But after a very brief reign, he will die, though not from anger or in battle. Once again, poisoned because nobody likes taxes. So he dooms his kid right from the start. Now, it says short reign, and technically, according to like previous dudes on the throne, yes, it was a short reign. But it was 12 years of high taxes before someone finally just says, all right, enough is enough, we're killing this guy, and poisons him. So 12 years in, Seleucus the Fourth, I don't know why, but the Seleucuses are always the crafty, wimpy ones, never the warring dudes. He gets poisoned, the taxes are finally over, hurrah! And then, this is where like the family line ends, and suddenly someone who isn't related to the last king, and the last king, and the last king, finally sits on the throne in the northern kingdom. Check out verses, this is going to be a bigger chunk, I think. Yeah, 21 through 34. This is all about the same dude. And this guy got some press earlier in the book of Daniel. He's kind of a big, important figure coming up in Israel's history. I know that's weird, but it's prophecy. So it's like history for us. It's the future for Daniel. This guy's going to be a big deal. Check out 21 through 34. It says, the next to come to power will be a despicable man who is not in line for royal succession. So God prophesies he's not related to the previous kings. He will slip in when least expected and take over the kingdom by flattery and intrigue. Again, also true, he got another powerful ruler who was in front of him to give up his place to him by promising him lots of money, which he actually delivers on and pays a bunch of people a bunch of money so he can be king. He actually makes good. He pays everybody he told he was going to pay. Verse 22, before him great armies will be swept away, including a covenant prince. With deceitful promises, he will make various alliances. He will become strong despite having only a handful of followers. Almost no one really liked him. They just liked the money he kept handing out. Verse 24, without warning, he will enter the richest areas of the land. Then he will distribute among his followers the plunder and wealth of the rich, something his predecessors had never done. He will plot to overthrow the overthrow of strongholds, but this will last for only a short while. Also true. God just keeps doling out the details. The way he stays in power, the fact that he's not king for very long, all this stuff, God just knows the details. Verse 25, then he will stir up his courage and raise a great army against the king of the south. The king of the south will go to battle with a mighty army, but to no avail, for there will be plots against him. His own household will cause his downfall. His army will be swept away, and many will be killed. Seeking nothing but each other's harm, these kings will plot against each other at the conference table, attempting to deceive each other, but it will make no difference, for the end will come at the appointed time. The king of the north will then return home with great riches. On the way, he will set himself against the people of the Holy Covenant, the Israelites, doing much damage before continuing his journey. Then at the appointed time, he will once again invade the south, but this time the result will be different. For warships from western coastlands will scare him off, and he will withdraw and return home. But he will vent his anger against the people of the Holy Covenant, the Israelites, and reward those who forsake the covenant. He's going to reward Israelites who stop following God. Again, God's prophesying all of this more than 100 years before it happens, and it all happens precisely the way it's being described. Verse 31, his army will take over the temple fortress, pollute the sanctuary, put a stop to the daily sacrifices, and set up the sacrilegious object that causes desecration. He will flatter and win over those who have violated the covenant. But the people who know their God will be strong and will resist him. Wise leaders will give instruction to many, but these teachers will die by fire and sword, or they will be jailed and robbed. During these persecutions, little help will arrive, and many who join them will not be sincere. All right, now we go a little further than last time. Previously, this guy, and we'll name him now, he's on our timeline, Antiochus Epiphanes. He was actually mentioned in the book of Daniel earlier. And the story with him in Daniel earlier ended with the end, he'll get his just desserts. He'll die, basically. We didn't get to hear the part about the Israelites fighting back. We didn't get to hear the part about the Israelites teaching each other the true way to worship God again. We didn't get the part about the people who are teaching the people all dying in the process. All being killed for fighting back against Antiochus Epiphanes. All being killed for teaching the truth about God. That part did not get revealed earlier in the chapter. That's new information. Obviously, there's a lot of details about Antiochus Epiphanes that weren't in the previous chapter, but the overall plot line we already had. That part was such a big deal, God's prophesied it multiple times now. He really wants his people to understand this, because what's going on is he gave them back the land. They've had a bunch of different kings ruling over them, but for that whole period of time, all the way from when they first got to go back in the book of Ezra, all the way up to here, they got to worship God. They got to actually go to the temple. They got to actually offer sacrifices to him. They got to be Israelites. And then all of a sudden, Antiochus Epiphanes puts a stop to it. What he does is he builds an altar, a bigger altar, a more impressive altar, there over God's altar. And he sacrifices a pig, an animal that was intentionally off limits by God's rules to the Jews. They were not allowed, the Israelites were not allowed to touch a pig, go near a pig, eat a pig, certainly weren't allowed to sacrifice it on the altar. And he does this in the temple, God's holy place. One of the only places on the whole planet where God would actually go and put his presence, like physically arrive. It's a really important place. And he just messes it up. And he outlaws and puts penalty of death and penalty of jail on anyone who decides to keep worshiping God. And so a lot of people stop. This is a huge deal for Daniel. It's a huge deal for his people. And the fact that there's this whole warning that it's coming, and he now tells the what happens after, this is huge. God's saying it's not the actual end. It's just a end. Yeah, he'll put an end to the sacrifices. Yeah, he'll mess with the temple. Yeah, he'll kill a bunch of people. But you guys will make it. Some of you will stand strong and you'll die for it. Some of you will stand strong and you'll go to jail for it.
Yay.
But when you stand strong, you'll spread the truth. And it'll make more people stand strong. And then when this guy's gone, you guys will get to keep worshiping God. This is a powerful message for someone like Daniel, who's all about worshiping God in situations where it doesn't really get you liked. It doesn't get you ahead. It doesn't get you good stuff. It gets you bad stuff. Daniel's been living that his entire life. He's been in Babylon. He's been in now Medo-Persia, where, things like getting thrown into a furnace or thrown into a lion's den or threatened with being pulled apart by 4 separate horses all tied to your 4 limbs is standard. Like, this is normal.
Damn.
You don't worship our gods, you worship something else, you're going to die in some weird, horrible way we're going to come up with right now. That's standard for Daniel. So hearing that they're going to get their land back, that's great. Hearing that someone's going to put a stop to the worship, that's not so great. But hearing that they're going to triumph in the end, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. All right, so now we get towards the end of the timeline. Oh, did we skip? We skipped a little. We've got to go back and read 35 to the end of the chapter. We're going to take a turn here. God's going to start describing how awesome it is to follow him and what the rewards are. And then, I love it, Jesus kind of gets like future nostalgic. Because remember, Jesus is the guy standing here talking to Daniel. And Jesus just starts laying out stuff and just starts jogging through time. Previously, he was walking through time going like, yes, this will happen. This will happen. And then he starts getting excited about the stuff that's way out there on the timeline. He's like, and then that's going to happen. And then that's going to happen. And he just gets going. And he picks up speed. And Jesus ends up at like the end of the world before he even realizes it. And so Jesus is going to just give this quick view of everything that's coming around the corner. So check it out with me. Verse 35. And some of the wise will fall victim to persecution. In this way they will be refined and cleansed and made pure. Check out this phrase, guys. until the time of the end, for the appointed time is still to come. The king will do as he pleases, exalting himself and claiming to be greater than every god, even blaspheming the God of gods. He will succeed, but only until the time of wrath is completed, for what has been determined will surely take place. He will have no respect for the gods of his ancestors. That is an interesting phrase. Or for the god loved by women. That is another interesting phrase. Or for any other god, for he will boast that he is greater than them all. Quick recap on the interesting phrases. God of his ancestors implies by the verbiage, if you look at the original language, this guy is Jewish. It's not certain, but it is implied then that the Antichrist, because that is likely who we've skipped up to, is Jewish. That it might be stretching it, but again, we kind of have to guess at things that are in the future, and then we get to look back after it happens and go, oh, that's what he meant. Sometimes we can't be 100% certain about the things that haven't yet been fulfilled, but we can be certain they're going to be fulfilled, because look, oh my gosh, at the ridiculous checklist that chapter 11 had, and it checked every box. As we went through, all the things that have already happened precisely as the details described. So I can be sure it's going to happen, all these future things, exactly as they described. Does that mean I get them all? No, I don't get them all. But they'll be made clear eventually. God loved by women. This is again reinforcing that he will be Jewish. Why? Well, because the God loved by women is a phrase actually common to Jewish culture at this point in history. Ever since the Messiah had been prophesied to be coming one day, every little Jewish girl grew up praying, hoping, wishing she could be the mother of the Messiah one day. That she would have the honor of being chosen. That was a thing back then. And so it was not uncommon to hear this phrase. Now in the original translation it's a little bit different. It would be the love of women if you directly translated it, but it was a coined phrase, and what it meant was the thing that women most desired. And in their culture, it was thought that the thing a woman most desired was to be the mom of the Messiah. So it's a bit of phraseology that's lost on us. We have to do like several layers of translation to get there. But that's basically what it means. Again, reinforcing that this is a Jewish person, just because we're using Jewish idioms. And he's going to boast that he's greater than all gods. Verse 38, instead of these, he will worship the god of fortresses. Another word there might be force or military might. So not really a god like a little wooden statue or a god like, you know, something that you would build a temple to necessarily, but quite literally nothing is more important to him than having military might, than having the ability to conquer, than having a fortress that cannot be beaten. Okay, cool, move on. A god his ancestors never knew, and lavish on him gold, silver, precious stones, and expensive gifts. Claiming this foreign god's help, he will attack the strongest fortresses. He will honor those who submit to him, appointing them to positions of authority and dividing the land among them as their reward. Then at the time of the end, the king of the south will attack the king of the north. The king of the north will storm out with chariots and charioteers and a vast navy. He will invade various lands and sweep through them like a flood. He will enter the glorious land of Israel, and many nations will fall. But Moab, Edom, and the best part of Ammon will escape. Now, those are all countries that don't exist anymore by name, but the place on the map they inhabit is Jordan and a portion of Syria. And so what we're looking at here, again, matches up with Revelation, very interesting, further pushing this to be the end times and not some strange interpretation of Antiochus Epiphanes. It doesn't really fit him properly. Jordan is actually called out in Revelation as being the place where the Israelites will have to run to if they want to get away from Antichrist. That nowhere will be safe, but Jordan will be safe. And so saying that this place will be safe here, and then later in Revelation, this place will be safe, kind of lines them up together.
But why is Jordan safe out of all places?
In this particular instance, Revelation goes a step further than Daniel does. Revelation names a city called Petra, that it will be fortified by God himself, so that no one can come against it. because he wants his people to survive to the end, and so he's going to protect the city, and that Antichrist, no matter what he tries, won't be able to attack it with any weapon, with any army, with anything. Yeah, like a God force field, however you want to look at it, suddenly it disappears from radar or whatever, but God miraculously protects it in the book of Revelation, detailing the exact answer that some of us would be asking, like you did. Wait, why is this one place safe? I mean, he's got like massive, ridiculous armies. All right, verse 42. He will conquer many countries, and even Egypt will not escape. He will gain control over the gold, silver, and treasures of Egypt, and the Libyans and Ethiopians will be his servants. But then news from the east and the north will alarm him, and he will set out in great anger to destroy and obliterate many. He will stop between the glorious holy mountain and the sea, and will pitch his royal tents. But while he is there, his time will suddenly run out, and no one will help him. So again, further lining up with Revelation. Revelation, again, gives us details further than Daniel in this particular instance. And what we get is the area of land now known as Russia, the area of land now known as China or India, are going to be the ones attacking the king here. So this king of the Middle East will try and press into Africa. That's the other countries named, Ethiopia, Libya, Egypt. And as he tries to get into Africa, he hears word that he's being attacked from the north and the east. That would be Russia and Indochina. And he runs back to meet them and has to camp out in Israel. That's where the armies all meet. They don't meet in Africa. They don't meet in Russia. They don't meet in Indochina. They meet in Israel. And more particularly, in Revelation, it mentions the Valley of Megiddo. This is the battle known as Armageddon. If you've ever heard that term before, that's where it comes from. It's from that place name. Megiddo, Mageddon, similar root words. All right. Ooh, I'm clicking things. All right, so last few verses here. But then, we read that one. Chapter 12, at this time, Michael, the archangel who stands guard over your nation, will arise. Then there will be a time of anguish greater than any since the nations first came into existence. But at that time, every one of your people whose name is written in the book will be rescued. Many of those whose bodies lie dead and buried will rise up, some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting disgrace. Those who are wise will shine as bright as the sky, and those who lead many to righteousness will shine like the stars forever. But you, Daniel, keep this prophecy a secret. Seal up the book until the time of the end, when many will rush here and there, and knowledge will increase. Then I, Daniel, looked and saw two others standing on opposite banks of the river. One of them asked the man dressed in linen, who was now standing above the river, which is a pretty cool trick, "How long will it be until these shocking events are over?" The man dressed in linen, who was standing above the river, raised both his hands toward heaven and took a solemn oath by the one who lives forever, saying, "It will go on for a time, times, and half a time." That's 3.5 years, most likely. When the shattering of the holy people has finally come to an end, all these things will have happened. I heard what he said, but I did not understand what he meant. So I asked, "How will all this finally end, my lord?" But he said, "Go now, Daniel, for what I have said is kept secret and sealed until the time of the end. Many will be purified, cleansed, and refined by these trials. But the wicked will continue in their wickedness, and none of them will understand. Only those who are wise will know what it means. From the time the daily sacrifice is stopped and the sacrilegious object that causes desecration is set up to be worshipped, there will be 1,290 days. And the blessed are those who wait and remain until the end of the 1,335 days. As for you, go your way until the end. You will rest, and then at the end of the days you will rise again to receive the inheritance set aside for you." So we see once again a double fulfillment. We see some of that fulfilled by Antiochus Epiphanes, and the way that the sacrifices in the temple stop and then get restarted later after he dies.
Why are you standing up? Sit down.
The second fulfillment will fill in all of the details, because Antiochus Epiphanes did not fill in every detail. The second fulfillment will be at the end. And it's interesting, if you go back through that passage in the original language, Jesus, who's speaking to Daniel, keeps switching between these two different words for end. He keeps switching back and forth. Sometimes he'll give a detail that works on both, and he'll say, "at an end," and it works for both. It works for Antiochus Epiphanes, and it works for the end of time. And then later he'll say something, and he'll say, "the end," and that one doesn't work for Antiochus Epiphanes. It'll be one of those prophecies that only works for the Antichrist only works for the end times at the end of the world. And so Jesus absolutely knows what he's doing. He's not just randomly spouting, yeah, this one for him and this one for him. He's just declaring, this one counts both times, this one counts only at the very end. This one counts both times, this one counts only at the very end. So in all this, we get some solace because Jesus knows how it ends. And so it's kind of amazing when we see horrible things happening on the earth. We go, God, why? Really, that shouldn't be our question. I love the question the people of the Bible have. They ask, God, how long? Because he's already declared what happens next. God wins. God wins. Yeah, Satan has his way for a while. Satan fights for a while. I love the way it's depicted here. Like Jesus and Satan and Michael, they all go have like a wrestling match. And like Michael's having a tough time with Satan and Jesus is like, I'll tag in. And just like goes to wrestle Satan. I love that imagery of like, well, I want to give a message to Daniel, but Satan's standing in the way. Michael, can you hold him for a sec? I want to go talk to Daniel. Do you get that? Like, that's how real it is for Jesus. We're not seeing it. It's all happening in a spirit realm, in a place we can't see. But Satan likes to try and get in the way of Jesus. And all Jesus has to be is, all he has to do is say, tag team partner, come here. Hold on to him for a sec. I got a mission. And so for 3 weeks, Jesus wrestled with Satan. But this is the cool part. Jesus got to quit when he felt like it. It wasn't like it took 3 weeks to beat Satan. It was that Jesus was willing to put up with Satan for 3 weeks.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
That's a serious amount of patience. Honestly. Serious amount of patience. And so that's what I really get from all this, is that God has so much patience, so much mercy, so much long suffering. He gives Satan a chance. He gives us a chance. He gives evil dictators and powers a chance. Everyone gets their chance, and they can waste it or they can take it. They can turn to him or they can squander that chance and turn away from him. But everyone's going to get a chance. Everyone God is patient for. That's amazing. But when the end comes, God already told us what is going to happen. And so that's the cool part. No matter how bad it gets, we don't ever have to ask God why. We can just instead ask, God, how long? How long? Sometimes he gives numbers. And he says it'll be 1,290 days. Wouldn't that be amazing to be like an Israelite in Israel? Antiochus Epiphanes goes and messes up the temple, wrecks everything, and then you're like, sweet! All right, guys, get out the calendars. Let's start seeing how long it is. Not, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Panic mode. Everything is ruined. It's just, his days are numbered. Yeah. That's so much better feeling. That's so much peace you can get when God just says, nope, this is how it's going to go.
It's not often we get an exact day count. It's usually time, times, and time and a half.
Right?
It's to figure out what that
For
is.
Antichrist, though, he just says, nope, this is it. He gets this long. That's fantastic. All right, so I just want you guys to have that thought in your head. God knows the future so perfectly. He can put in any details he feels like. And he wants you guys to understand that he wins in the end. And that Antichrist only gets this little tiny piece of time, and that's it. So as scary as some of that Revelation stuff can be, we already know how it finishes. We already know how it finishes. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you that you've detailed the end from the beginning. That you've always known how it's going to go, and you've been telling us for years now how it's going to go. Help us to understand these passages, to take hold of them, to use them to bolster our faith, to move us away from fear and away from doubt. Help us to get close to you and seeing all these details you poured out in advance, fulfilled throughout history. We ask you, Lord, for help. Help us to keep our faith strong. Even when times get really hard, help us, Lord, to go to you and ask, Lord, how long? I am weak. Give me strength. How long, Lord? How long must we endure? Help us, Lord, to have faith that you will always be victorious in the end, that you will always find a way to use suffering, a way to use hardship. Help us, Lord, to take strength in that. We ask all these things in your name, but with our heads still bowed, with our eyes still closed, if there's someone here today that's never before said, God, make me one of your family. God, make me one of your kids. Forgive me for what I've done wrong and give me everlasting life. If you've never done that before and you've been worried, like, what's going to happen when I die? God told Daniel, very clearly that when you die, you'll rest for a while, but I will resurrect you. Jesus put more details on it, and he said that when you die, yeah, your spirit will go to heaven to be with him, but that at the end, when everything's going nuts and crazy and wild, that's when God is going to give you a heavenly body, one that will last forever. Now, this is not an automatic thing. In Daniel, in the Gospels with Jesus, it's always made clear you have to be part of God's family. You have to put your faith in Jesus to make that possible. You have to have your sins forgiven. And then the resurrection will be amazing. And then you get to live in heaven forever. But only if you've put your faith in him. Only if your sins have been forgiven. So if you want to do that right now with no one looking around, everyone's eyes closed, just put your hand up. Everyone's eyes closed. No one's trying to figure out who's doing what. This is just between you and God. Anyone today want to start a relationship with God and join his family? All right, well, Lord, we thank you for these junior hires. Bless them as they go. Help, Lord, all these things that are happening right now to come and fall into place. We ask that in your name. Amen. I love you guys. If you have questions about our room and why it is different than usual, please come talk to me. I didn't have time to slip it in today to everyone. But if you are curious, don't run away without knowing. Come ask questions. Yes. In fact, I think Emily's in there right now. You might be able to snag something before she leaves. Who's this? Ta-da!
One day I decided I want to share with you, I get it. I know.
That's not bad, is it? That's good.
Well, we decided that if I got it, I'd share with him, and if he got it, he'd share with me.
Yeah, Christian, that's silly because you win every time, like no matter what.
Yeah.
But the one time he made it, he didn't win too.
Exactly. See that?
Silly as
I don't know if that's luck or just a good gambler.
Well, I have been to the casino.